Good afternoon. I'm Brian Abernathy, Managing Director of the City of Philadelphia. And on behalf of the Mayor, I want to thank all of our elected officials, our community advocates, all of the city staff, and certainly the press for being here today on relatively short notice as we introduce our next police commissioner. Policing today is not the same as it was when Commissioner Timoney, for Commissioner Johnson or Ramsey, or for even Commissioner Ross. The events of the past year plus have challenged every Philadelphian and forced us to reflect on what is most important when it comes to public safety. While we have watched violent crime rise, we have also watched racism manifest itself in social media posts, sexual assault committed by those at our highest ranks, and the further eroding of trust between our police officers and the very community they have been sworn to serve and protect. At the same time, we've watched our police officers do more than just fight crime. They have become social workers, drug addiction specialists, and homeless outreach workers. The complexities of our society, our need to feel safe and our need to feel respected, our want for retribution and our need for justice, our battle for the rights of those accused and those wronged, cross paths, sometimes almost violently, in our police department. Some of the hardest days of my career, days that I've had to question my dedication to public service, have centered around our police force. The incidents at Starbucks, ICE protests, the murder of a 2-year-old and the murder of a colleague's son, allegations of sexual harassment within the department. And yet, this is also a police department that has given me some of my most rewarding days. The resolution of the shootout on North 15th Street, homeless outreach in Kensington at 2 a.m., events that show the best of our officers, their humanity, their expertise, and their compassion. DNC protests without arrests in the Eagles Super Bowl, watching officers toss a football at the NFL draft. Through all of it, I've known that these men and women became police officers to help people. And part of my job has been to find a way to support them and help make them better. And that's how we approach the search for our next police commissioner. In late August, we launched an extensive search in which 31 candidates were considered, including 18 from within the department. The city received assistance during this process from the Police Executive Research Forum, a research and policy organization that also provides management services and technical assistance to law enforcement agencies. This group helped us with outreach, identifying qualified candidates, and in the interview process. In addition, we sought input from residents through an online survey that gathered feedback on what issues they thought were most important and what characteristics they believe new commissioners should have. We heard from roughly 4,000 people from all parts of the city, and input helped shape the questions that were asked of each candidate. Questions about integrity, police community relations, gender discrimination, stop and frisk, and approaches to violence. I want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who participated in that survey. I also want to thank those who stepped forward to be considered for this position. The interest from national candidates proved that the Philadelphia Police Department, despite its challenges, is a place that people want to be a part of. And the internal candidates displayed the talent that we have grown here. Tumar Alexander managed that process on my behalf. His thoughtfulness and his balance is much appreciated. And thank you also to the large number of city staff that represented the Managing Director's Office, the Office of Criminal Justice and Public Safety, the Law Department, the Mayor's Office, and the Police Advisory Commission, who had participated on various interview panels. All of these perspectives were helpful in making a final selection. Finally, I want to thank Christine Coulter. She stepped in as an interim commissioner at a very difficult time. And since then, she has been attacked publicly and privately. She has been forced to defend herself, sometimes fairly, and more often unfairly. And throughout, she has exemplified grace, professionalism, and expertise. She's held the department together through a very trying time. She's a great person. I want to thank her for everything she has done. And with that, it is my pleasure to introduce Mayor Jim Kenney, who will introduce our next commissioner.
Well, thank you, Brian, and good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for being here on relatively short notice. As Brian said, today I am pleased to appoint Danielle Outlaw, Chief of Police in Portland, Oregon, to serve as the next Commissioner of the Philadelphia Police Department. And I would like to publicly again thank Christine Coulter for her unwavering leadership over the past 4 months. As Brian indicated, she stepped in and along with her command staff brought stability to the department during a really difficult time. Her leadership and the strong leadership of the executive team will be needed as Chief Outlaw transitions to Philadelphia. Our administration is about to begin its second term, and over these past 4 years, no single appointment has been as important and as carefully chosen as the selection of Danielle Outlaw to be our next police commissioner. As Brian described, we went through a very thoughtful process since August. All of that led us to a truly outstanding individual with a strong track record of running big city departments, reforming with innovative ideas, and building bridges. Outlaw is a native of Oakland, California, and served for nearly 20 years in the Oakland Police Department, rising through the ranks to become Deputy Chief of Police. Her assignments in Oakland included patrol, criminal investigations, and internal affairs. Outlaw was the second female deputy chief in the history of the Oakland Police Department and the first this century. While serving in Oakland, Outlaw won the 2015 Gary Hayes Award, a national award given to those who have demonstrated leadership and innovation in the police profession. Previous winners included our own Chuck Ramsey and Richard Ross. Danielle Outlaw was appointed as Chief of Police in Portland, Oregon in October of 2017, becoming the first African-American woman to hold the position. In Portland, she was extremely successful, challenging the status quo and adopting novel approaches to policing. Outlaw implemented crime strategies tailored to the needs and challenges of individual precincts, resulting in decreases in crime rates. Under Danielle Outlaw's leadership, the Portland Force made its greatest strides in achieving use of force reforms under a federal consent decree instituted prior to her tenure. This included new policies to address excessive force against those suffering from mental health issues. And under her watch, the Portland Police Bureau has received national and international recognition for work in community trust building, crowd management, response, and constitutional policing. As most of you know, I am the son of a Philadelphia first responder, and I think constantly about what it takes to be a police officer. Our men and women in blue leave home each day knowing they are about to put their lives at risk to protect our community, and that even on a good day, they are likely to encounter extremely challenging and disturbing situations. I know officers take on this sworn duty first and foremost to help other people. Their devotion to public service is never forgotten. But make no mistake, while I have tremendous respect for our officers, the Philadelphia Police Department does need reform. And I'm appointing Danielle Outlaw because I am convinced she has the conviction, courage, and compassion needed to bring long overdue reform to our department. And I can tell you that after meeting and speaking with her at length, I came away confident that Danielle possesses the strength, integrity, and empathy vital to the tasks ahead. I think everyone who was involved in the interview process came away just as convinced and just as impressed. And with our support, she will tackle a host of difficult issues, from racism and gender discrimination to hard instances of sexual assault on fellow officers. These are issues that are too often negatively impact women, especially women of color within the department. Commissioner Outlaw will implement reforms with urgency so that racial, ethnic, and gender discrimination are not tolerated. At the same time, she will work relentlessly to combat crime, particularly homicides and other violent crime. This will include a focus on our multi-departmental effort to stem the tide of gun violence which plagues our city. Her commitment to restoring the community's trust in our police will be equally strong. She understands the history of race relations in Philadelphia, particularly the distrust that many residents justifiably harbor in the wake of decades of injustice. She will be devoted to listening and encouraging constructive exchanges of ideas and concerns from all Philadelphians. Danielle Outlaw will tackle divisiveness with dialogue. These have been trying times with fear and anger fueled by decades of injustice, and more recently, abhorrent rhetoric at the national level. I know Philadelphians will rise above that. Whether you are a longtime resident worried about crime on your block, an African-American man who fears being unlawfully stopped for a broken taillight, or a patrol officer who feels unappreciated by those they serve, I ask for your help. Set aside your preconceptions and your anger, and join me in supporting our new commissioner as she leads the department through the tremendous challenges that are ahead. As we approach the new decade, I'm optimistic that these reforms will usher in a new and better era for our city. And with that, I'm pleased to present our new police commissioner, Danielle Outlaw.
Good afternoon. I know there's press here and they can't say good afternoon back, but good afternoon. Thank you for being here. Thank you, Mayor Kenney and Managing Director Abernathy. I am honored by the faith that you are placing in me to lead the Philadelphia Police Department. I would also like to publicly thank Portland, Oregon Mayor Ted Wheeler, the residents of Portland, and the great members within the Portland Police Bureau. It was an absolute honor to serve alongside each and every one of them. While I'm new to Philadelphia, I am not new to the challenges of a big city or 21st century policing. I encountered and dealt with the issues of employee health and wellness, equity, contemporary training, crime, fair and just prosecution, community trust, homelessness, substance abuse, police accountability, and innovation and technology, just to name a few, as I worked various assignments and rose through the ranks in Oakland, California. And I directly addressed these issues while leading the police force in Portland, Oregon. Modern policing is data-driven, but the paramount factor is not so easily quantified, and that's trust. The trust residents have that their police force will keep them safe and treat them with dignity and respect. I am convinced that trust can be restored here and all across our nation. I am convinced that community policing or community police relations can be rebuilt and fortified through dialogue, transparency, and accountability. That was true in Oakland and in Portland, and I know it to be true here in Philadelphia. It will be an absolute privilege to serve as Philadelphia Police Commissioner and to serve each and every one of you who live and work in this beautiful city. I will work relentlessly to reduce crime in Philadelphia, particularly the insidious gun violence that plagues too many of our communities. And I will do so in a way that ensures our people are trusted equitably, regardless of their gender identity, race, ethnicity, or sexual orientation. I will ensure that the values embodied in the badges and uniforms of the Philadelphia Police Department are those same values embodied in the diverse communities of Philadelphia. We will be accountable to ourselves, to each other, and to our communities. But to be clear, I cannot do this alone. No single commissioner, no single mayor, no single commander, no activist nor elected official can lead such change alone. I ask each of you for more than your support. I ask for your help, your thoughts, your wisdom, and your ideas. Most importantly, your time, because I do not know what I do not know. I ask you to open your minds to the possibility that these changes can help all of us. That this is not an us versus them, one side against the other. We can be supportive of police, and we can be supportive of police accountability at the same time. They are not mutually exclusive. Together, we will build a department that is just as compassionate and humane in serving our residents as it is effective in solving and reducing crime. And I will do my absolute best to achieve that. Thank you very much.
Before we open it up for questions, I'd like to ask the Council President to say a few words.
Good afternoon. Welcome.
Thank you.
You like the Philadelphia Eagles? Just saying, that's first test. You passed, flying colors. As a mayor and Brian have said that we have had some challenges, but I, like them and my colleagues, believe that our Philadelphia Police Department is one of the greatest in the country. Just like other municipalities, particularly large municipalities across the country, we have issues every now and then. But the simple issue is that, do you address those particular issues? Do you act upon addressing those issues? Do you take a different turn? And in this particular case, it is clear that the mayor has recognized the need to make some reforms to improve on what we believe is a good police department. We are here, the City Council of Philadelphia. I don't know what type of budget hearings you have in Portland. Some commissioners will explain that to you. It is a little bit challenging here in the city of Philadelphia. Not only do you have to respond to the council members, but the people, the constituents actually get to sit like right behind you. And they have signs and all that stuff, you know, so you will get a test on that. But we're going to be there. So I just want to say, Mayor, Brian, and all the members and the people of the interview team, I want to thank them so much. Council, we're committed. We're going to be there, support you, give you the resources, and we will give you an opportunity to go through our districts and talk to people that we think may provide some assistance to you. So thank you so much, and congratulations and welcome. Thank you.
We're now going to open it up for questions. A couple quick ground rules. One, remember Chief Outlaw is new here, doesn't know everybody, so if you all could introduce yourselves as you ask your questions. And again, just a note that the commissioner schedule is full today, and so she won't be available for one-on-one interviews. And with that, happy to answer questions.
Chief Outlaw? Sir. You come from a department of about 800 officers.
Jeff, could you introduce yourself? Thank you.
You come from a department of about 800 officers or so. From what we read, there were luckily 28 or only 29 homicides, I think, in last year in the city. There were 353 here. There are 6,500 police officers. It's the poorest big city in America. What makes you able to make this big jump and do this job?
So there were actually more officers than that in Portland, but as I stated in my comments before, major city policing is major city policing regardless of where you are in the country. The issues are all the same. Contemporary policing principles are no different. When it comes to addressing violent crime, as such was my experience in Oakland, it's really important to make sure that we embrace a comprehensive approach that goes beyond just enforcing and arresting. It requires the use of human services, community input, as well as the enforcement arm and collaboration working throughout the criminal justice system. So while I am very qualified to make the jump, again, the issues remain the same, and I'm very experienced in each of them.
My name is Jeff Valley with ABC in Philadelphia. Can you tell us what are some of your ideas to combat the gun violence and the homicide rate here?
Well, I literally just landed, so I will certainly need to take a look at what's already been done or what's in action. But I am very supportive of the model that is being looked at now. Again, it's been very impactful in other major cities across the country, and that does include utilization of partnership outside of the police department, the use of evidence-based data, making sure that we are spearfishing and we're not casting a wide net, because we know it's a very small percentage of our population that's responsible for the larger percentage of crime, and then making sure that there's follow-up throughout the system when we identify who those individuals are. So it's a lot bigger than just one simple answer today, but there are a lot of models out there that have proved very impactful, and there are some things in play here that I think that we can put together.
Some of your most important replacements will be deputy commissioners. How many do you plan on putting in place, and what sort of input do you get to make those assignments?
I think input is very important. I'm not prepared to answer that in its entirety at this moment, but input is very important. As I said, I don't know what I don't know, but I've also been doing this long enough to know that I know what I know when I see it. So there will be some time before those appointments are made, but at the same time, I still have to take a look around and get to know some people.
Some community groups say that they are looking forward to working with you. They want to see how you will open up the lines of communication with them to help get the message out to people that they do serve. And they're also asking for you to end the policy of stop and frisk. How would you respond to those?
To which part?
How are you looking at communication groups and where do you stand on that?
I think communication is important, and I have found that, well, let me back up. Given that we have technology today, information gets put out immediately. And generally, because we run 24/7, something can happen at 3 o'clock in the morning, and it's either live streamed or it's put out on social media 1 minute later. And we find ourselves as police departments on the defense all the time. And it's helpful to not only be transparent, I know it's a buzzword, but it's helpful to be as communicative as possible, because that doesn't allow people time to create their own narrative and fill in those gaps when we can just provide that information if we can in the first place. So I'm a strong proponent of that. The other piece about stop and frisk, I know this was discussed prior to my arrival here. I believe in making sure that not only the way we police is constitutional, but also making sure that when we have a connection, if we have a legal reason to detain, that there's a criminal nexus. So I think there is a need to make sure that we maintain the law enforcement tools that we have that are legal, but at the same time, we have to make sure that we don't over-police and use the tools that we have in an unequitable way.
Chris?
Chris, I'm the chief of fire. Some of the challenges of this job are laid out by the mayor and managing director. I'm wondering if you could explain why you want to take this.
That's a good question. I thought that would be the first question, actually. I'm very comfortable in the legacy that I leave behind in Portland. We got a lot accomplished in a very short period of time. There's a very strong leadership in place there internally, and this isn't, when asked, this is not an opportunity, I think, that I would have been wise to say no to. There are a lot of similar issues. Here's why. The issues that were mentioned are all issues that I've personally dealt with before, and I know that with the skill set that I have, that there's a lot that I can do to add value. So to me, it was a no-brainer. Yes, it's a larger city. Yes, it's the same issues on a different scale, but I already know that there's some really strong people that are working within the police department that can help move us forward to where we need to be.
Max?
One of the larger issues we have with Portland was around extremist organizations coming to the city and causing protests. Are you confident in how you handle that situation, and do you think you're prepared to come to
So which situations? It's kind of rhetorical. I say that because in Portland, what a lot of people don't know, the laws are very different in the state of Oregon, but we dealt with hundreds of protests throughout the year, each year. And the ones that got the most attention were the ones that sometimes were actually quite successful. And all it takes is one person to create the narrative. With that said, over the last 2 years, we've learned a lot in our crowd management response. We brought in an outside consultant to do after-action reviews of our responses, and I'm pretty happy with what they found thus far. With that said, the resources, even though the Portland Police Bureau is the largest police department in the state of Oregon, it's apples and oranges, because again, the laws are different in the state of Oregon, and then the resources here in Philadelphia are quite different. Far more police officers to address the issue before it really gets out of hand. With all of that said, I am a firm believer in upholding free speech, the rights to assembly, but what I will not tolerate are those who come under the guise of free speech or under the guise of the Constitution to create acts of violence against others. And we would see that a lot. We would see those who claim to be activists and commit acts of violence against those who were also counter demonstrators. And I've had activists come up to me personally and say, I used to be out there, this is part of Portland's tradition, but I won't do it anymore because I don't feel safe. And I'd say, why? Because of the police? And they say, no, it's because of these other folks that are here intermingling within the crowds. So crowd management in Portland is a lot more complex than what the rest of the world had a chance to see, but I'm fairly confident that, again, Philadelphia PD has done a good job with handling demonstrations here already, but the resource issues are a lot different here than in there.
Kristen from KML News Radio. What would you say is maybe your biggest accomplishment in Portland? Like, what are some of the programs maybe that you implemented as your commissioner?
I don't think it's any one program. If you take a moment to look up, so the police department was under, and still is, under a settlement agreement long before, and a settlement agreement is like a federal consent decree. with several tasks within the settlement agreement that call for reform, all centering around measures around accountability to include use of force, discipline, training, all those sorts of things. In the 2 short years that I've been there, we got the initial checkoff by the monitors saying that we were in substantial compliance after the department had been under this agreement for several years. I think that's a huge deal. But even most important, I saw on August 14th a group of community members come together in a coalition that had never been together before. Traditionally, a lot of community groups worked in silos, but they all came together at myself and the mayor's request in one unified message to say they were against hate, they were against criminal violence and behavior in the community. We held a press conference on that day, and they all stood behind us. That what I would say is my most proud moment in Portland, and that was bridging gaps and bringing people together that otherwise would not have sat at the table before.
Sean?
My name is Sean Walsh with the Inquirer as well. My question is for the mayor, actually.
Thank you.
Mayor, you talked about the need to reform the police department. Was that part of the reason you decided to go outside of departments?
I mean, I think we've had good, really terrific commissioners that have come from outside and terrific commissioners that come from inside. I just think on occasion you need some outside eyes and some different experience to get to the bottom of things. You know, Commissioner Timoney and Commissioner Ramsey were both outside folks who did tremendous things. Commissioner Ross was a tremendous leader and came from inside. So I just thought it was time for an outside fresh look, and she wowed us all in all the interviews we had. And we're very happy with our choice.
Can you talk about that process, about the kind of close nature of the process?
Well, Brian can have more details for you, but understand, people who are from outside the city, who work in departments around the country, we could not expose them for their desire to move to another job. I mean, it's something they would have never applied if they knew they were going to be exposed. So having that, and the other issue is when it came to exposing the people who were on the panels, they would have been lobbied, lobbied for people of their own favorites within the department, or maybe outside the department. So we felt that it was appropriate to keep it not secret, but keep it private so that people could have a chance to apply for the job and not create employment issues or difficulties back in their own department. Yeah.
You said that you were convinced that she got on and to make reforms. What was it specifically?
I just think it's her directness. I think it's her intelligence. I think it's her experience. That gave me confidence that this is the right person for the job. I mean, you sometimes you just know when you're in an interview when you run into somebody with that kind of talent.
And what will be her salary?
Her annual salary is $285,000. 285. Channel 3?
Yeah, I'm a little bit to CBS 3. I was going to ask, you had more than 30 people applying for this job. What set the chief apart?
Brian, he participated in all these discussions and interviews. I just have confidence in her. I think she carries herself in a dignified and way that gives me confidence that she can lead this department. And she has the experience and she has the resume to do it. And I think, and I know that this is the right choice.
I'd just like to add to what the mayor said. You know, throughout this process, we asked difficult questions. A lot of the same questions you asked her to hear today, we asked in that interview process, just like we asked all candidates. Her directness, her simplicity in her answer, and her forthrightness in what she both learned and what she could bring to the department is really what set her apart. We threw her some curveballs, and she hit them all out of the park. I can't wait to work with Chief Outlaw going forward. Oh, So we aren't going to share the candidates. Obviously, some of those candidates still have positions in other departments. Happy to talk through exactly whether it makes sense to say who was actually on the interview panels. All those departments were represented. There was a screening panel for internal candidates that then recommended internal candidates to essentially a first interview panel. That interview panel would then recommend final candidates to a panel that included the mayor and myself. It was a fairly robust process with significant gender, age, and racial diversity, and feel like it was strong to make sure multiple perspectives were heard. Max? There were 3 candidates in the final round. Ma'am?
And Purple Black Vote, Radio1.com, Ms. Outlaw. We have been flagged in the city of Philadelphia with sexual abuse and misconduct. As a black woman, how do you plan on combating that?
Well, first of all, I want to say whether I was a black woman or a white male or whatever it is, I think it's important to be very clear about what expectations are. Again, what's tolerated and what will not be tolerated. Whether it's sexual harassment, sexual abuse, just gender discrimination, whatever it is, it's not tolerated. And there has to be clear policy, there has to be follow-up, there has to be consistency and accountability around those issues.
Jeff?
2, if I could. We've had
I'll give you 3 questions.
we've had a spate of children shot in the city of Philadelphia. I think the reporting in the Inquirer is more than 100. Some have been killed, some have been killed inside their own homes. One, how would you protect children in the city of Philadelphia from gunplay? Secondly, we understand you had an hour-long conversation this morning with the head of the FOP. Can you describe that, and can you tell us whether he asked you whether some of these cops removed for Facebook posts that are inappropriate should be allowed back on the force?
Well, going back to the second question first, yes, we did meet. I thought it was very important to meet before we had a press conference today, and that really was just a very high-level introduction. We didn't go down in the weeds about any of the upcoming issues that we'll be sitting at the table to discuss, but it really was just an introduction. This is my first time in this building, my first time meeting him, and we wanted to make sure we established the groundwork before we rolled up our sleeves and got the dirty work done or the difficult work done. In answer to your first question, I think, like I said, I just got here. So obviously our children are included in our most vulnerable, and we have a responsibility not just as adults to protect them, but as the police department to make sure that our most vulnerable are safe. So I will be working very closely with our team here to make sure that we do what we can to ensure not only our children's safety, but the safety of everyone in the city.
Chad?
How do you think the street cops and detectives in Portland would describe this?
I would say I'm fair. We can agree to disagree. I'm consistent. I'm decisive. But if there's time, I sit down and I'm very collaborative. I'm very open. And it's not just internally. It's the same way with the community. I brought a lot of new ideas and a new way of doing things to Portland. And I was very careful about striking change, sweeping change as soon as I got there. It was small incremental change over time, and I wanted to make sure that they not only knew who I was as a person, but also when it came time to make tough decisions, they understood why.
During your time as Deputy Chief in Oakland, the homicide rate went down several years. Did you have an impact on that, and what sort of policies did you put in place that made up that?
I worked with a very strong team that ran all of our strategy around that. I was responsible for one of the most violent portions of the city of Oakland in East Oakland. And it's exactly what I mentioned earlier when you talked about the gun violence problem, what we did to implement solutions as it related to that. And when the light bulb clicked on that it was solely beyond enforcement of laws and having to partner with community and making sure that any strategy is driven by community. When that light bulb clicked on for us, that's when we began to see things change. When we were very focused on who we were paying attention to, the needle began to move because we weren't just casting a wide net. We know that there are some really good people that live in some not so good neighborhoods. So there's a lot that goes into that. There's messaging, there's making sure that we get out ahead of time and come up with these strategies with community as opposed to imposing upon the community. So again, there's a lot of things that worked really, really well in Oakland that I see Philadelphia has either already began to look at and is interested in moving forward toward.
F.
You guys are asking a lot of policy questions today. I just got here. What was the first question again? I have the. So whether it's overdose, substance abuse, mental illness, a lot of the social issues that we're seeing today, I've made it very clear that I do not believe that first responders should be the ones dealing with a lot of these issues because they're not crimes, depending on what they are. The same way we would send someone with a kidney issue to the hospital. If I have a disease that's evolving around substance abuse, am I necessarily the best person, meaning law enforcement, to deal with that, right? With that said, I do believe that there has to be consequences, and they need to be proportional to whatever the crimes are. So if I know that someone's walking around with a medical disease, addicted to an opioid of choice or whatever it is, I believe that it's our first thing, our responsibility to make sure to use our seat at the table to advocate on their behalf, whether it's hospitals or clinics or social services or whatever those are. Now, as the behavior continues to evolve and if crimes occur and they become more and more serious, then that's when we need to step in. But we have to be flexible, we have to be willing to adapt, and again, it's not arrest, arrest, arrest.
Next.
Thank you, I knew it was something. You asked two questions. All right. You know, I don't believe that that's something that the police department should spearhead, but I also believe that we have to be open to new ways of addressing issues. So while I don't have a position on them either way, we all know that something has to be done. And we cannot continue to be called for issues that are far outside of the crime enforcement realm.
Next.
I saw him very briefly this morning. I look forward to sitting down with him and communicating further. I don't have any opinions on his policies yet, but I do think it's very important to make sure that the police commissioner and the DA's office are in constant communication. One, so no one is blindsided, and we just have a very, very clear picture on where we stand.
So did you say you imposed incremental change in Portland? Do you expect to do incremental change in the city of Philadelphia?
It depends. It depends on what the issue is. Some things require swift action, and some things can take a little bit more time. But again, once I'm on ground and have an ability to assess where we are, where we stand, where the gaps are, where our strengths are, where our weaknesses lie, I'll have a better answer for you for that.
Do you have a sense of what would be, I mean, obviously you have a sense of what the issues could be, but what needs swift action? You must know that.
I don't have an answer for you yet today, because I know you'll take that and say in 30 days, did you do it yet? Give me a minute. Give me a minute. You know, I think about it all the time. I was also a first in Portland, and quite frankly, for a long time, it was a distraction. A lot of people said, oh, you got this job because. I've been a black woman all my life, and I chose the career of law enforcement, so I happen to be a police officer who's a black woman. But with that said, I bring a very unique perspective to this role. And I understand, my sons are 21 and 18, I'm saying hi to them out there. Being a mother, I'm a mother first, and I understand the fear that's out there in our communities of the police. I understand the mistrust. I understand also on the other side why we do what we do in law enforcement. I understand how we train. And I think it's important in my role to, whether if I have to be that conduit, I'll be that conduit. But I think it's important for me to explain perspectives on all sides because I'm in those rooms. But I do not take lightly the fact that I am a first here. I understand what I represent. I understand who opened the doors for me to be in this position, and I understand that it's also my obligation to hold the doors open behind me to ensure that we're not in 2020 still talking about firsts. So while I appreciate the honor, I want to be very clear that I am one of many. There are many, many, many of us in law enforcement that just need an opportunity, and they've been working behind the curtain for a long time, and all they need is an opportunity to have their moment.
All right, last question, folks. All right, thank you very much.
Thank you. I was like, oh, this is my finger.
Congratulations. Give him my